Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Mackenzie, a 5th grade teacher in Northern California. If you're new here, I upload new teacher tips every week, so please be sure to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up so it can reach even more teachers. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing 5 ways to use Epic to teach reading. If you aren't familiar with Epic, it is an entirely free online digital library that gives you and your students access to thousands of books. And if you have used Epic, I hope this video inspires you with some new ideas on how you can use it with your students in the classroom. So let's get started. One of my favorite ways to use Epic in the classroom is to use it for research projects. I know when planning research projects for my students, one of the biggest obstacles that I often come across is just finding enough kid-friendly, nonfiction resources for my students to use. Epic is known as the Netflix of children's books because when you go on that website, it is completely geared to what books you have already read, what books you have looked at, and your homepage is going to look different than my homepage, and that is going to look different for every single student in your class. So when my students are just brainstorming different topics for research, I really encourage that they just go onto Epic, look through a lot of different texts, and see what really catches their eye and what topic interests them. Then once they have their topic, they can search for their topic for additional books and videos in that search bar. Many of the books also have a read to me option, which is really helpful when my students are doing their research independently, because even if it's a text with difficult vocabulary or not quite at their level, they can still have the book read to them, which is really helpful to gain their independence. Also, if they come across a word that maybe they don't know, they can actually click on that word and then a little definition pops up and they can see what that word means. The videos on Epic are also really informational. I know that they're going to be kid-friendly and there's not going to be ads on them, so that can be really great to supplement their research too. If I notice a student is having difficulty finding enough books or resources about their topic, then as a teacher, I can just go onto Epic, find books that I think will be helpful for that student, and then just assign it directly to that student to help them out. Also, if there is a group of students that are all researching similar topics, it's really easy for me to just make a collection. So say they're all researching deserts, then I can make a collection of books about deserts and assign it to just that group of students. Or if you're doing a whole class research project and you want to assign that collection to the whole class, then you can do that too. So do take the time to teach your students how to use all of those features on Epic, the read to me option, the videos, because all of those can be really beneficial for their research. A new way I am using Epic this year that I'm really excited about is for virtual book clubs. I really didn't want my students to miss out on this year being remote, but I knew that they all had access to the same books on Epic, so I knew there was still a way to make it happen. So even if you're remote, you can still assign one book to a group of students and have them discuss over those Zoom calls. Or even if you are in person, I know it can be really hard to get enough books to run book clubs in the classroom, and so this is another great option even if you are in the classroom. So just some tips on how I like to run my book clubs. The first thing I do is choose a genre. So I might choose fantasy or historical fiction, whatever we're working on in class, and then I'm going to go on to Epic and make a collection of books for my students to choose from. I find that when my students choose the book they're going to read, they're more likely to be more engaged during those discussions with their classmates. Then they're going to spend one day where they're just previewing all the different books in that collection and choosing their top 2 choices. I then create their groups based on that information and assign each group their book for book clubs. And right now, since we're remote, then my students are going to have their book talks and discussions with their classmates over our Zoom calls. The reading log is a great tool to keep track of your students' reading too, to make sure that everyone's pulling their part so that they can have engaging book talks with their group. There are definitely other ways you can organize your book clubs. That's just what I have found works out for my class. Also, keep in mind that on Epic, students have access at home during school hours. So they have access to these books from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., plus an additional 2 hours that resets every week. So do remind your students that they should be reading their book during school hours. Book clubs really are one of my students' favorite parts of the school year, so even if you're teaching virtually, you can still make this happen. The third way to use Epic is for small group instruction. I know I can always use more books for guided reading, and just finding enough level texts that are engaging for my students can really be a challenge. Like I said earlier, Epic literally has thousands of texts, so you can actually organize your library by level. So in your account settings, you can choose which reading level system you use. For example, I use F&P, so now all of the books that I see will be leveled with that system. This makes it really easy for me to find books and assign it to the group of students that I'm going to be meeting with. This also makes it really easy just to search up a topic or look by genre when trying to find those texts for your small group for a specific reading level. I also really like to make collections just for myself to get a little bit ahead of planning. I know that doesn't happen often, but I like to find books that I know I'm going to want to use with my small groups and just make a collection that's organized by level or organized by topic. So then later on, I can just go into that collection, find the book that I want to assign to a group of students, and use that for guided reading right now. The fourth way to use Epic is to have your students practice reading skills and strategies. No matter what grade you teach, I think it is super important to find time to read aloud to your students. Even teaching 5th graders, I do find time most days to read a chapter of a book that we're reading together. It is just such a great opportunity to model different reading skills and strategies in front of your students, really show what a fluent reader sounds like, and just bond over a really good book together. On Epic, there are really so many amazing picture books available that you can use as mentor text to model different skills and strategies for your students. And even if you are remote, I just have Epic open and then I share my screen on Zoom so that I can still read aloud to my students and use those texts. It's also super helpful so that I don't have to lug around my whole classroom library, which I kind of already did. You can also have your students practice their fluency on Epic. So like I mentioned earlier, some of the books have a read to me option, and that can be very useful when students are practicing their fluency. Not all of our students get read to at home every day. So just having that opportunity for students to listen to a fluent reader, follow along with the text, and as they have that text open, it actually highlights the words as they read across, which is super helpful as they are learning to read. I really like having my students listen to the story and then reread the story again without the sound on to actually practice their fluency that way. There are also audiobooks available on Epic, which is great for listening comprehension. So I actually like doing this as a whole class so that we can listen to the story together, and then I can pause and check for comprehension by asking them questions throughout the story. You can also have your students practice visualization, so as they are listening to that audiobook, have them sit back, have a piece of paper, and draw what they are hearing in that story. My students love this, and I love that they are practicing their visualization skills. Some of the books also have quizzes, so you can use those to check for understanding with your students after you assign a book to them, or you can actually create your own quizzes if there isn't a quiz already available for a book. So that's another way that you could check for comprehension or have your students practice a skill after they've read. The fifth way to use Epic is to help your students
build strong reading habits.
I know as teachers, we want our students to love reading, and that means helping them build really strong reading habits and understand themselves as a reader. So on Epic, there already is a reading log on there where students are able to track their reading, and you actually have access to that as a teacher. The reading logs can actually be a really helpful tool to better understand your students' reading habits so that you can help them become stronger readers. Looking at their reading log, you can see how much time they've spent on a book, what books they've read, which can also just help you get a better feel for what books they're actually interested in. Or maybe they're only spending a couple minutes on each book that they're reading. That would tell me that student needs help finding some books. Something I do with my 5th graders, and I really recommend you doing, especially with older students, is having your students reflect on the patterns that they notice about their reading log. Have them notice what they're doing with their books. Are they abandoning books a lot? Are they spending only a couple minutes on each book? Or maybe they are doing a really good job at finishing a book from beginning to end. Just reflecting on their own reading log can be really powerful for them to set goals as readers. One of the best parts about Epic is just their library collection. They have so many really engaging books, which can be so helpful for our reluctant readers. There's graphic novels that I know a lot of my students gravitate towards. Even for our English learners, Epic can be such a great resource just to familiarize themselves with English, listening to those texts, listening to those audiobooks, and then there's also text in multiple languages and bilingual text, which can be a great way to just foster that love of reading so that they have books in their home language. There really is something in there for everyone. It's just giving our students the tools to know exactly how to find it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, just a quick reminder to click that thumbs up button. Please consider subscribing for all my newest teacher tips, and I hope to see you again next week.